In this podcast, we have Nick Werber back on the show. Yay! In this episode, we talk all about intention setting and the process that brings in our lives, what it means and how to move through, as well as where our family system's intentions, our ancestry's intentions come in and how to respect those. Find out if Nick and I are the black sheep of our families and whether there's a black sheep in you. Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Embody Podcast, a show about remembering and embodying your true nature, inner wisdom, embodied healing, and self-love. My name is Candice Wu, and I'm a holistic healing facilitator, intuitive coach, and artist sharing my personal journey of vulnerability, offering meditations and guided healing support, and having co-creative conversations with healers and wellness practitioners from all over the world. The podcast is supported by so many of you out there listening and people who either quietly donate some money or give their feedback and their encouragement. Thank you all so much. And if you'd like to support the podcast in a more specific way, there are two options right now that are very interesting. You can sign up for a periodic personal meditation that I record personally for you based on your intentions and based on my intuition of what you're sharing and what might be needed. And that can be a one-time experience, an MP3 that I send to you, or a gift to somebody, or by subscription where you get that periodically. Or if you're interested in something that has more connection and contact with me, you can join my embodied group healing call. These very small groups offer a compassionate and embodied soul support space for anything you're going through in life. So if you'd like to learn more about that, feel free to go to my website at candicewu.com/support. Following this episode will be a special recording by Michael Picucci of an adaptation of Bert Hellinger's writing. So Michael Picucci is Nick Werber's mentor and friend and fellow healer, and he speaks about him in the first episode that we have together, that we recorded together last year, and in this episode. So you can hear a little bit more about Michael Picucci. And Bert Hellinger is the founder of Family Constellations. Both of these beautiful people and healers passed away last year. And so what a lovely experience to have this on the podcast for all of you to experience. And Nick was such a close person to Michael that he's offered to share this on the podcast and knows that Michael would really love for others to experience it. The offering in this meditation is called consenting, and it's lovely to inspire bringing consent to people around you, situations, agreeing to what's happening and what your human experience is, such that it brings new possibilities or allows ease and brings the next unfolding. So be sure to tune into that later this week or following this episode, depending on when you tune in. And without further ado, here is Nick. I'm not really sure how to jump in, Nick. This is your second time on the podcast. It's so cool to have you here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be back again. I know, since last we did that first podcast, it's surprising. It's people, every so often, it's like, oh, I found you through, Candice Wu, and I love Candice. And so I'm really excited to be back because, a lot of people love that first one. At least they tell me so.
Yeah, I get a lot of great feedback from it too. And it's, people really have enjoyed what you have to say and our conversation. And some people could just feel like that we were friends. And that's so true. I just so appreciate you, Nick. And the first podcast we did was maybe about a year and a half ago. And for those of you who haven't listened to it or maybe want to review, it's at candicewu.com/Nick, Nick. And it's also it's also on your website, right, Nick?
That's true. I think it is. Yeah.
At nwerber.com. And Nick, can you just tell the listeners out there a little bit about who you are and what you do, just as a refresher?
Sure. So I call myself, the label that I use is an integrative coach and a healer. And really what that means to me is that I pull in many, many different modalities into my work. And some of the big ones are family constellations work, which is all about, this work of how so much of what we're facing and experiencing didn't start with us. That the context that we live in has a huge effect on who we are. So that can apply to family. It can also apply to our nation and our culture, as well as our ancestral history. That these things, that long tail of history actually has a real effect on who we are. And then for me, it all my work is really founded on this bedrock of somatic trauma work, specifically a modality called focalizing, which is, really just the best practices, I think, of anytime you're working with trauma, that overwhelm is the enemy. And you might hear this just in the way that I speak and the way I approach things, is that I think the best healing is done in this very stable, gentle space where people can feel safe. And, in addition to that, I also have a bunch of training in hypnosis. Sometimes the way I say it is that, the work all of it is focused on, we have these very deep, unconscious parts of ourselves. As far as we know, we might only use somewhere between 1% to 3% of our brain, and consciously, only 1% to 3% of our brain, our mind is conscious. And so all the work I do is really about working with the unconscious and how that affects so much of what we're experiencing.
Beautiful. And Nick, I think I told you this before, but someone recently told me that you and I could have been brother and sister in a past life, or siblings in past life. And that just makes so much sense to me on many levels, which I'm not going to get into now totally, but that just want to relate here, that how that feels true in some ways. We're like siblings in this healing embodied work. And that's part of what I so value about your work, is how much of the experience and the process that you bring forward, and that I love as well, and do my own versions of. But I also deeply value the way that you use your language and words to key into very important and relevant topics that we're all dealing with in some fashion, that get people, it like creeps in sideways in new ways, fresh, very refreshing way of speaking and writing, that leave an echo in me. So thank you.
Yeah. It's in addition to the practice, I'm absolutely a writer at heart and love writing about the subject. And I love what you said about that we were brother and sister in a past life. I believe it. And I'm sorry I interrupted you. Maybe in that past life, as an older brother, maybe I spoke over you. I don't know.
well, what I was told specifically was that in the past life, I always lived in your shadow. And I felt like I could never come out of the shadow next to you. And so I was struggling with the feelings of not being good enough in relation to you, and always trying to win at that game, but never winning. Never winning.
Oh God, that's sad.
It is sad.
I'm sorry.
No. I mean, yeah, you better be.
Yeah.
And just for all of you listening out there, the reason this came up was that I and I think I told you, Nick, I would read your posts and then I would feel so like jealous to the point of feeling bad about myself. Mm-hmm. Not the kind of jealousy that says, ooh, this is exciting. This challenges me to grow, which is probably more where I am at this point. Mm-hmm. But when I was getting triggered by your wonderful posts, I was like, ugh, I'm not enough. And like, now I need to be doing what Nick's doing. And I need to write like that. And I could hear myself. And I was like, why? So it really helped to bring that into the light and for the emotions to move around it. But yeah, stop speaking over me, Nick. I'm just kidding. You hardly do that. No. You were just saying before we started recording that this is a totally different experience already. And I'd love for you to share why with everyone.
Well, last time, basically, I think we spent the first half an hour after we connected just working on why the microphone was so loud. And I live in New York City, and so there's always some kind of construction or weirdness. Like even this call, this podcast, I purposely asked you to do earlier in the afternoon because when it gets close to 2 or 3, there's going to be school buses outside my window, backing up and beeping and all that.
Oh, the beeping. Yep. Yep. And you've got your mic from back in the day when you used to record music.
That's true. Yes. Yeah. I have the microphone that, it's kind of NPR uses, and it's really beautiful. And I pulled it out of a closet and it was dusty, and there was something sitting on it. So the foam is all deformed, but it sounds good.
It's revived.
Yes.
Well, I made a big mistake, Nick. When you emailed me last night about some of the topics you wanted to talk about today on the show, I read it at 10 p.m. your email, and then I couldn't sleep for like 4 hours. So it's really all your fault. I mean, that I read the email. But it was like 10 p.m. and I'm reading your email, and you're bringing up the topics that you're interested in. So I'll just say some of them because I think they're fabulous. And that is what kept me up until like 2 a.m. because I was just like thinking about these topics and your thoughts about them. And so excited to hear from you about intention and the intersection of family and family history in regards to our intentions or how they weave in, what we reject and what we resist, and how that impacts us and stays with us. You wanted to talk about the beauty, mystery, and meaning behind who we're born to in this life and what that more alive perspective can look like versus a dead perspective. And then a little bit about narcissist versus empath relationships and black sheep, and also this misnomer of letting go of something or letting things go. So yes, obviously.
When you put it like that, now it's like, whoa, that's a lot.
Right? I was like, boom, my head was like, okay, yeah, and also I was like getting back in the game of life after the holidays, and I kind of just went into a cave. So before we jump in, I was wondering some of the words I wrote down for myself yesterday when I was just gathering myself, trying to come back into my regular sort of schedule, as regular as that can be. But some of the words I wrote down were cave, because I was emerging out of a cave, surrender, the need for trust, clarity, but also not knowing at the same time, and then beauty and quiet. And I wondered, Nick, what words are popping up for you in your experience of life at the moment?
I think flow is one. Shame is another. Connection. And I think the word, it's almost like expanse comes up because I feel, as you know, Candice, I got married in September this past year, and there's, so much, an event like that kind of focuses you in such a powerful way. And, right afterwards, it's kind of holiday season comes through. And now I feel like there's this sort of expanse of, now what do I do with the rest of my life?
With the rest of your life. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, that's a huge expanse. Yeah. I can imagine, right? It, like, having a wedding, you said, focuses you so much. It's like all your energies seem to culminate to that moment, and all the people in your life, at least from what I saw of your wedding. And then coming into this, I don't know, sort of quiet space or open space.
It's open and it's playful. It's like, I choose my adventure now. And I mean, I chose my adventure before too, but you choose it and then everything becomes very singularly focused. I feel now there's a little bit more of a playfulness with each day. I can choose my adventure, and it doesn't always have to relate to a particular goal either.
Mm-hmm. Sounds really nice. I like that.
Yeah, it is nice.
Yeah. And then you said shame, connection.
And
there was one other word. I just forgot the first word.
I think flow.
Flow. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to say any more about those before we tune into the topics we have for today?
I feel like they're going to come through in whatever we talk about. Because I think speaking like this is a co-creative process, and whatever's living within us in this moment comes through. I'm borrowing a little bit from writers that I like, and I recently, a little bit of a tangent, but I've been watching a little bit of Mad Men again, and been interested in Matthew Weiner, and he basically said it's every episode is what he was experiencing, when he wrote it. Mm-hmm. I think that's true for most creation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where the energy comes through somewhere. Mm-hmm. So speaking of, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think I feel a sense that I'd like to talk about intention a little bit, because it is, New Year's time, and it's just so, I think it's top of mind for so many people right now.
Yeah, I was feeling that too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you create an intention for the year or for this time period?
I created several intentions. And, I found it actually reminded me how much I love intention. That for me, when I'm just working, kind of getting through my day, doing tasks on, an hourly or a weekly basis, whatever that kind of goal line is, I start to lose track of meaning. I feel like I'm kind of floating, and I'm not sure where I'm going, or, maybe people relate to this, where you just kind of realize, like, why am I doing this actually? Mm-hmm. And intention, I think, sitting down and actually writing down, here's what I think is a life well spent, my time well spent. And it's not that I didn't create a bucket list. It was, my intentions are a little bit more short term than that. But there's just something very powerful to collecting yourself and writing down, here's what I think is a good use of my time. Here's what I want to give to other people. Here's what I want to receive. And I couldn't believe how much better I felt when I just did that simple process.
Yeah, to me, that's actually such a playful process too. It's like, I get this chance to gather myself and see what does feel meaningful, and to clarify it. And I have felt that power of not just the writing down, but for me, I use visioning, like seeing it in my mind and kind of carving out that vision in my mind. That it's not always so cut and dry. Like I'm going to look at a vision of what I desire or what I'm looking forward into, but it's this feeling sense that comes with seeing bits and pieces of where things are going for me or where I'd like them to go. And it's really fun. It's like playing with consciousness, playing with myself.
And I think when I hear you say that, you're getting at something that I think is very important about intention, which is that intention is really supported when we find ways of moving beyond our just goal setting kind of thinking mind. And so visioning is one way. When I do an intention setting, I really tap into my body awareness quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I think we have so much intelligence that is beyond our task-oriented mind. And that intelligence is so important when it comes to, I think, finding intentions that are valuable to us and valuable to the world. And, knowing, like you said, seeing what's emerging ahead of you.
I love that. And when you say you use your body awareness and your body intelligence, what exactly do you do?
So I actually have been playing with, and this is what I used in this most recent intention setting process, a very specific way of working with body awareness, which is that I sit and I write the intentions, one intention per a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And then I actually put them out on the floor and then stand on each one and embody the intention. And I'm sure this will sound very familiar to you, Candice, in terms of family constellation process. You just step into the intention, just close your eyes, tune in. And I do this with my clients as well. And it's amazing how quickly you get that little sense of, ooh, that's, it's not the next 5 years. It's actually in the next 10 years. I'd like to receive this, or maybe, you start to suddenly get really strong senses of the wording of what you wrote. Mm-hmm. And if you just connect with your body a little bit, you can feel, am I feeling contracted here? Am I feeling expanded here? Does it feel like a yes? Does it feel like a no? And so I like things that get you up off the couch and connecting with things, not only, in your mind's eye, but also in a physical way.
Yeah. It brings more of us into the picture, alive into the experience. I love that.
And, and this is, I have to give a little bit of a nod to one of my teachers, a person named Dr. Michael Picucci, but mm-hmm. he would say at this time in a conversation like this, that we should set an intention for this conversation.
Okay. Well, yeah.
And I just thought that that came to me as maybe a good idea.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't we take a moment and feel that?
Yeah. And it's funny that you said feeling, because it definitely feels like a feeling to me, actually.
What are you getting?
So to me, the intention, and just for kind of listeners, there's the intention that we might think we want to have at the end, but there's a level of intention that's kind of, it's like what already is there, asking to be connected to. And so that's what the second part is, what I'm speaking to when I say this, that for me, when I just think about the intention for this conversation, there's a fullness in my body. It feels like this feeling that I get when I'm like, wow, I listened to something that I'm going to be thinking about for a couple of days and processing and referencing. And it's kind of that feeling of, I'm glad I spent time doing that.
Mm. I love what you said, like what is already there and asking to be connected to. Mm-hmm. And I find that when I tune in that way and listen, it's a more aligned intention. Like it emerges, it reveals itself. It's already living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the feeling that you're bringing up, the fullness, and the feeling of the listening to something here.
Mm-hmm.
I got the words being extremely honest with myself and outwardly, and then also playing with the ideas that the concepts that we have put on the table, like playing with you, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you, in your email to me about these topics, you said, feel free to disagree or feel free to, argue with this or something. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to. Let's see what happens. And I could, we just the idea of play and curiosity and what emerges out of that sort of challenge on both sides, I think, but as more of a collaborative play.
It's so, serendipitous almost that you, honest and being outward. It's funny. My partner, Jen, was sitting in our kitchen and I was talking about this podcast a little bit. And I said to her, I think I'm going to be a little more edgy this time. And I'm just going to say what I feel. And, maybe it might turn some people off. I don't know.
Bring it on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I want to play with that. The edginess. Cool. So do we have our intention, or was that just more I didn't know if I heard a specific intention from you or just a feeling you'd like to experience. Am I getting it right?
It was a little bit nebulous. I think the intention is to share something both between you and I that provides a sense of fullness, provides a sense of, a gift that you can sit with and play with, even, for a time after this conversation. And, and then I'm including the third player in the room, the audience, that maybe they can experience something that they can play with and sit with and digest for a few days that gives them a sense of fullness as well.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. That's great. And just inviting people to play with these topics and disagree with us or find where there's a new opening. And, I'm just saying that out loud because that also helps me do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Michael Picucci, as well.
Yeah.
And just honoring him.
Yeah. He's a major inspiration for everything I do. Funny, on his website when he was alive, it would, you'd see PhD psychologist, but if you met him, he was very just quick to laugh with a very raspy voice, flamboyant gay man who was a shaman and an energy worker. And, I think of him almost as the archetype of the joker, the one that kind of laughs and tells jokes. But if you really think about what he's saying deeply, he's maybe the most honest, most real person in the room in a lot of ways. So there's my little nod to Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Hopefully. Wish I had the opportunity to meet him in person. So, intention. What comes up as you play with the concept or the idea of intention?
What's sitting with me about intention, I have this community of healers and intuitive people that I love that are around me, and both connected to them online and through some of the workshop spaces and communities here in Brooklyn that I'm in, and everyone's talking about intention. And I think the thing that, for me, I don't think it's touched on enough, that I think it's helpful to acknowledge, is that, intention is a process. When we set intentions, it's not just that we write something down and then we put it away in a shelf and, we hope sometime a year from now it's going to end up on our doorstep. For me, and in my experience, and for my clients' experience, it's an active process. And one of the clearest ways that it's really active is that I believe the moment you set an intention, what you're really doing is saying, I'm ready to see what's been standing in the way all along. When you say, I want to find a relationship, or I want to be making more money, it's incredible how, in the next few weeks or months, people suddenly are playing in that shadowy stuff, those barriers that have been around for a really long time, that are directly related to these topics. And I see that actually as a positive. It's kind of, whatever you want to call it, universal intelligence, or just the way the universe works, is that it brings a barrier to you, and then it's like, okay, now here's your work. Now bring in your resources. Maybe it's a therapist or a healer that you work with, or just being a part of your community. You have to resource yourself and actually go through it. Mm-hmm. For Christmas, I just got my partner purchased me a sweater that says the only way around is through. And
nice reminder.
Yes, and that's what this is. It's you set the intention to see the barrier. And I think people don't realize that happens. And so when they find the barriers, when they come up against suddenly, like, it just feels so hopeless, or there's so much doubt, or I feel so much fear to go out and do that thing that I want to do, they might start to think, oh, maybe that's a sign that it's not really meant for me, or this isn't going to happen, or it's not the right time. And it's like, no, like that, there it is. Like, you are now being given the exact wall you have to chip away at, and your intention's on the other side of it. So I think what I want to, if there's one thing people take away from this conversation, and it's that, to see intention as a process, and to not be discouraged by the barriers, because that's exactly what that process is, I believe, meant to do, is to bring up the barriers.
Yeah, I'm ready to see what's been standing in the way all along. I love the words you expressed about that. It's just such a nice statement. And we don't always think about that exact position or approach when we're creating something, or like listening or creating something we want for ourselves. And I just think it's such an important thing what you're bringing up, because yes, so often I've seen it in myself and clients everywhere. We find the resistance, the thing that scares us the most about it. And then we turn around and think, well, maybe that's just not where we're supposed to go, because it's scary, or because it's going to bring us some discomfort, or let us look at something that we have not wanted to look at, perhaps. And I see exactly what you're saying too, in the way that that barrier comes up and says, okay, you want this, you want what's behind this. You need this to come along. This barrier is the place where you've resisted or avoided. There's energy here. And when you transmute this, when you transform or look through, go through it, as you say, instead of around it, that energy will come with you and support you in the end, if you make it through. And we need it. We need it to go forward into the next thing. We need that expansiveness, because that's why we wanted what we wanted to begin with. It's going to bring us more. So thank you for bringing that forward.
it's almost like give yourself credit. There's
Yeah.
a reason you might not be making $1 million a year. It's because it takes there's hard work, there's barriers there, there's a lot to bust through. If you come from a poor family, you're leaving behind a whole generations of certain way of life. It's if you want that intention, if you want to connect to that intention, there are some barriers you have to bust through, and that takes work. And so it makes sense that you maybe hadn't connected to it yet. Again, you need the energy, you need the resources to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that just made me think, well, maybe that's why people goal set instead of intention set. Because, maybe it also has a crossover. Even when we goal set, there's something that's going to come up. But for people out there that are like phooey to intentions, like, I don't want to deal with intentions, or I'm not doing that. Giving yourself credit. Yeah. That it can be scary to set an intention, because the wave of things that might come in succession after that on the pathway towards what you're looking at.
Exactly. And that's why, it's also beautiful that if you set a really big intention and you're not ready for it, you can stop.
Yeah.
You can take a pause.
Yeah. I just love this. I have this image in my mind of a child, I've been there, standing on the edge of like a step and feeling like I want to jump down 3 steps. I've done 2. I'm going to jump 3 steps now. And I have this, I guess maybe this sort of archetypal image of an adult or someone older saying, just do it, go, just go. And like kind of pushing you to go with their energy and with their encouragement. But there's something incredibly beautiful about standing there on the edge and finding from within your own sense of I'm ready, or I'm ready to take the jump and I don't know what it's going to bring. It doesn't mean I'm ready and this is going to be easy, but that sort of leaning forward and being like, oh, maybe not, and kind of leaning back and playing at that edge instead of just bypassing that and jumping without some sort of internal choice. And a friend mentioned to me this video, which I still haven't seen, but I've been meaning to, and I'll link it to our show notes, of I think this artist just recorded people at a diving board, like high dive, and they were doing that. They would like come to the edge, and some people would turn around and just never come back. And some people would like stand there for an hour or something, or like period of time, and like go forward and back and maybe make the dive. But it wasn't really even about the dive, I think. It's just the process of us being human and being in that experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, I actually have seen that diving board video. Yeah, it's so funny. I'm kind of YouTube is sort of my little guilty pleasure when I have downtime. So I've found it somehow. But to follow that metaphor a little bit, I find with intention setting, we set an intention, or I set an intention, and then it becomes, okay, I start to receive it. I'm for instance, I had intentions about working with more and more people in group settings. And so I'm getting these group workshops are coming forward. They're doing really well. And then it's like, I recently, in the past year, I was off, or in the past few months, I got the opportunity to work and do this retreat in Mexico, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about. But it you can hit that moment of suddenly, ooh, it's like, it's a bigger thing. It's going to be more of a commitment to the people coming. And then suddenly it's like, ooh, the diving board's too high. Like, I don't know about this one.
Yeah, it asks way more of you.
And I think that's really common, that you get on a roll and it's like, what's your tolerance? And I'm not saying, push through everything either.
Mm-hmm.
I respect that tolerance level. But there is, that's part of this work. That's one of the barriers is fear, that you might come up against the fear of success, the fear of, maybe speaking in front of a large audience or, whatever your intentions include.
Yeah. And this kind of loops me back to the beginning when you said that we can just get on a roll, or we can be in motion and wonder why we're doing it. Or is this what we even wanted? And I think that that's a really can be a really challenging place when the bigger thing comes, the bigger diving board or whatever it is. And you're on the roll of the intention that you once had set. And there's that place of, okay, now I think that diving board is too high, or this is really scary. This is a lot, and it's asking a lot of me. And when we feel into that place, it can sometimes mean this is no longer what I wanted, or wait, where have I gone? Is this what I wanted? And is it what I want now? And distinguishing that from the fear of the expansion and capacity, what it means to step forward and continue on, that can be a tricky place. Do you find that?
Absolutely. When I hear you talk about that, I think we're really connecting in some way to just the human condition, which is, in some ways we're walking down a cave and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, but we just have no idea what's there and what's ahead of us. And there's a lot of mystery. Absolutely. And, I think this is also why it's sometimes very attractive to listen to someone that says they know, that they know the answers. Because we're, in a sea of mystery all the time, being alive in this world. This doesn't get you out of that process, but for me, I do think, there's kind of three ways that I think about working with intention. One is the setting it process, like the planting the seed, writing it down, which can be a really exciting and kind of expansive piece. Then there's what we've talked about, which is the meeting the barriers, which can be so shocking how different it feels. It's like, oh, it was so expansive in the beginning. Now it's so friction filled, and that can kind of discourage people. But there's a piece in between, and maybe all around all of it, where I do think it's nice to have some sort of practice where you're connecting to your intentions on a regular basis. And you don't even have to do it every day. But for me, that writing it down and stepping on the sheets of paper, I do that once every other week with my intentions to just see, how am I feeling now? Is there still kind of a change or anything that needs to be shifted here? Or how am I sitting with it? Just to kind of keep allowing my own intuition, my own body awareness to keep teaching me and showing me new things. But if, even the most trained somatic healers that spend all their time with body awareness, which I really spend a lot of my time leaning on my body awareness, even with my clients, it's how a lot of my intuition comes through. The body, it speaks in feeling. It's not in words. And, even that I think is a metaphor. It's like so much of the way life speaks to us is it's the exception is when it's extremely direct and says, go do this. But a lot of it is, there's messages that are kind of in a gray area, and it's up to us to feel what feels right for us.
Mm-hmm. I didn't really set intentions this year.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Gasp.
You're screwed.
It's over. But the process is
feel
still
like
happening.
the way you said it was like you dropped a bombshell.
Confession. It's like all this talk about intentions, and well, I think that as I'm reflecting on myself, that there have just been different ways that I've worked with the process of intention and setting it, and some processes feel more epic than others. There are times in my life where it feels that it needs a very, very, almost like a ceremony to set intention and to create the space for it. And other times of my life, it feels like a quieter process and maybe this is also more along the evolution of my own capacity and healing, that it feels almost like a part of me, a part of each moment, in fact, that if I had to put words, as you eloquently said, this is a feeling, this is an experience. But if I had to put words into the process, it might be something like, where am I right now? And what am I feeling? And what do I want to lean into right now in the capacity of who I am, like the state of being that I'm in? And so the words I'd give it right now as far as intention, maybe it's just going back to what I said in the beginning, surrender and trust. And I'm not sure if that's the intention or if that's just how I want to be right now, surrendering. And it's very moment to moment. And I found that in the last couple of months, my astrologer said to me that it was Uranus and the chaos of Uranus, that it brings this unpredictability and changing your mind moment to moment. Even what was in this moment can be totally the opposite the next or the next day or the next week. And I have felt that very much in the last couple of months. And so when I have planned too far ahead, for me, it will derail itself. So I just felt like, I'm just not going to waste my time doing that. And that's very particular to me in my process. I don't know if other people are relating to that. Maybe if you have the same birth chart as I do. But surrendering to the moment and going deep, though, not just like to the topical satisfaction of the moment, but something deeper, of a deeper movement towards the next movement. So in a way, it's very unknown. It's just this movement to the next. So yeah, there's my confession about intention.
Well, Candice, I feel what you're sharing about the way you're working with intention just makes me think, that is so you. And I think that's one of the things I really admire about you, is the way that you just free fall with spontaneity in so many areas of your life. And that's brave. That's awesome. And
Thank you.
So it makes sense to me that you'd be saying that. And I think in some ways, maybe we represent two different poles around on the subject, and people can take kind of little bits from either of us. Because for me, it's the spontaneity and the free fall. I get kind of lost, and the planning really focuses me in this way that increases my effectiveness. But of course, there are things that are lost.
It's beautiful.
And spontaneity is so. Who wouldn't benefit from embracing a little bit more spontaneity? And I think you really are like a role model for that in a beautiful way.
Thank you, Nick. It's not that I don't get lost sometimes too, though. But I also, I guess I'm okay with getting a little lost. Maybe that's the thing.
You have a high tolerance for it. Maybe is a way of saying it.
Maybe. But yes, I think you're right. There's just a time for all different kinds of tools. And I think the processes you're bringing up, they're incredibly powerful. And they do work at times. I mean, they will open things up, and they will, if you follow through, or I guess I should only speak for myself, when I followed through the resistance, I've landed in exactly where I wanted to be in a way, but in a place I couldn't even fathom. And on the other hand, but I know it somewhere in my body that's what I wanted. So yeah, I think just putting out a menu of how we can all approach this thing called human experience is really great. But let's talk about family and lineage and what you're thinking about in terms of how that intersects with intention.
Sure. So, for people that might not know, it's really the focus of my practice is around how family and family history are at the root of so much of the barriers that we experience. And, the way when I speak to this, I'm not really speaking to it from this kind of maybe like a clinical perspective. For me, it's really on this kind of soul level that we're born to this mother and father. We might have had older siblings or younger siblings or no siblings at all. And that becomes this very powerful template that follows us around. The roles that we played with our family, the types of people we were surrounded by. I think I had, as an example, it's like if you had a parent that was a narcissist and one of them was distant, and then did you try to befriend the narcissist, or did you reject them and try to ally with the distant parent? Or, the permutations are infinite, but it becomes this bedrock by which so much of what we become or how we emerge out of our family is so much a reflection, either an acceptance or a rejection of where we come from. And why this, I think, is relevant into intentions is I think so many of us are probably aware on some level that our family has intentions too, and that those intentions were pushed on us. And, and so maybe the simplest one would be go be a doctor or be a lawyer. But it goes deeper than that. And I'm actually very fortunate, and it's actually complicated. When you don't get this, it's also confusing too. But I would lean towards saying I'm fortunate that I came from a family that the main message I got was just all we want for you is to be happy. I mean, that's like, I'm very, very thankful that I got that message. And there was not a push to be a certain thing. I didn't have to be something.
Wow.
However,
yeah,
not to be glossed over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge deal. Yeah, it's a big deal.
But yes, what's the shadow side of it? What?
Completely shaped my life that I received that message.
Yeah.
Well, one of the shadow sides is if you're just supposed to be happy all the time, if that's the goal, then you're going to be falling short all the time.
Yeah, I wondered.
It's impossible to hold happiness at all times.
All we want for you is to be happy. Yeah, I didn't know if it was literally happy, and the pressure to be happy could come with that, or if that just meant it was open. But it's sounding like that would create a lot of we're much more than just happy in our experience of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's depression in my family, which is so obviously what that is a reaction to.
Now, when you say that,
just want you to be happy. And so, so then it becomes, well, what if I don't? It can be a little bit confusing. So it's funny how these messages, no matter what they are, even if it's so simple and sounding so innocent, like we just want you to be happy, it still gets confusing.
And in a way, we could just turn it around and say, and maybe this is where you're going, but seeing that maybe the words are more, maybe the words are, all I want is to be happy, coming from wherever that came from. But impressed upon you, it's a totally different experience.
Well, Candice, I think you're nailing it right now, and we're about to go very deep into my own, constellation. But yes, absolutely. There's a funny way, and I think this can be extrapolated, that the desires that our family have for us are so much, obviously, a desire to have it reflect on them in a certain way. And absolutely, the message of "I just want you to be happy" was, if you're happy, then I can be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that will fix things for me. And funny enough, me and my sibling were not very happy as children. It's funny how that
is. Funny? That's just so strange, Nick. Everyone wanted you to be happy. Yeah.
Yeah, but that has to be earned, and it's a process. Yes. But I want to kind of bring it back slightly. Of our family has intentions for us. Sometimes they're very concrete. We'd like you to do a certain job. We'd like you to be a certain type of person. And so when we're setting our own intentions, that has to be included in our awareness about, what is our intentions, and what are the intentions that we're carrying actually for someone else in a way. If I'm happy, then if I can do that, then finally maybe my mom can be happy. And so there's a piece of that needs to be respected. And there's also there's another part of intentions that I think is really important, which is that anytime we change in a way that we are leaving the sphere of where we come from. You want to make $1 million and no one in your family ever did that. You are breaking through a barrier there that, you're part of this family consciousness and you're leaving it. And so there is an element of guilt that comes with that, whether you're aware of it or not, that sometimes when we connect to our intentions and we're creating change in our life, there's a part of it where we are leaving something behind. That's change in any form. To connect to something new, you're always in a way leaving something behind. And so that factors into our intention setting too.
Absolutely.
Where we come from. Yeah. What we emerged in within our family.
And I feel like this conversation is flowing two ways in my mind at the moment. Looking at our own intentions, and I love what you said about respecting the pieces that may connect with an inheritance or with other people in our lives, or maybe given to us, just respecting that. Versus you saying, no, that's a bad intention then, right? You need to give that up or change that. But just respecting it, just honoring it is just such a lovely approach you're bringing.
Well, and maybe the way of adding to that would be to say, just because our parents wanted something for us doesn't mean it's bad. And this starts to get into, after working with many different people of different family backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, I feel very strongly that the family we're born into is this incredible. It's a wealth of information. It's a huge teacher for all of us, and even if you disagree with pieces of what they shared with you, there's, they still taught you how to tie your shoes and eat and maybe cook. There's a million basic things that come across from family that, doesn't matter how much you reject or how much you disagree with, you took from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much conversation in the world of intention setting about getting to the why or understanding why you're choosing that. And I think that's very important. And it's part of what you're bringing forward in this conversation is what are the pieces that influence the reason that you want this? Or, whether that's personal, family, or other, any other systems you're part of, or if you believe in past life. But here we're speaking about family. And when you said just because parents wanted something for us doesn't mean it's bad, I feel if we also get to the why of, like, they wanted you to be a doctor, say, or they wanted you to just stay in the lines and not make a mess and not stick out, that there's a why underneath that. And we can really get to the essential love that they wanted for us. And I can't assume that that's for many people or all people, but it's in my experience that lives underneath it, that there's something underneath in the undercurrent of that more topical message that people have gotten that says, well, we really just wanted you to be safe, or we really just wanted you to be yourself or be happy, or which, as we're talking about, comes with all sorts of stuff. But there's something else underneath it that we can look at as well.
You're totally right. And I think safety is especially the big word in that. And it brings up for me, something that Suzi said, Suzi Tucker, our shared teacher, about this subject. Suzi had been talking about the just ancestral component of Jewish culture across the world, and where, how the history of persecution has affected people today. And, one of her, she always says these things, they're always like an aside, all the best. And then it's like, whoa, I need to write that down. And what she would say is that in the shadow of the Holocaust and how many people were lost, there's many, obviously, Jewish families that push their children to become doctors, lawyers, bankers. And as she put it, she said, what's the common thread line between so many of these career paths? It's that they're essential. They are needed. Your society can't work without them. And, when you think about the genocide, it's like, how do you become necessary in the world? And I think that's a really clear example of how ancestral history affects family on a really, the macro affects the micro. But this is happening across all cultures and with all different kinds of histories, that the past influences exactly what our mothers are telling us today.
Absolutely. How do you become necessary in the world? Ugh, that hits somewhere deep.
Yes, it does.
So the thought I was going to say about looking in two directions, it's like looking at the family in the past and looking at what's been carried through the generations and how that comes into our intentions, and looking forward also in the other direction. I mean, maybe it's the same, but I had an experience where someone told me, if you do want to have children, make sure you don't do it because of wanting to give your children a different experience than you got. And I was like, yeah, of course. And then I was like, oh yeah, of course. because actually the thought that came next was, well, then what would the reason be? And there was this part of me that couldn't think of what would be a good reason. Like, how do I verbalize what would be a good reason? How is it clear enough from the reactions of myself or from the reactions of my ancestry. And that was a little tricky. And what I got to was just for like love and experiencing, allowing someone to come into life through me, but that they're completely free to be however they want to be. And that was really hard to, in some ways, articulate it clear enough, because wanting your child to be happy, there just can be so many shadow sides to that and unknowns, unconscious parts. But even what I'm saying, I don't know if there are some dark, like unconscious parts, but I guess I'm tangenting a little bit because I also, as you know, Nick, I work with horses and I enjoy time with horses. And yet I struggle all the time with the fact that we keep them behind fences and we keep them accessible to humans the way we want. But do they want that? And it would be some time as a whole for that to shift. But if we really believed in the freedom of another being, then, how do we see and treat them and think about that? And so I guess looping back to intention, when it comes to bringing life in, maybe that does apply too to the things that we create that are not just human life or animal life or caretaking for others, but what we're creating as far as what we're birthing.
Well, I think there's so much metaphor in birth and creation, and I think in many ways, the creative pursuits are kind of a process, a feminine process in a lot of ways. That birthing, that creation. I do appreciate what you shared, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I think you are not alone, and I can imagine there's many people listening right now that would resonate with that about having children in order to somehow change the way, give them an experience you didn't have. And there's a piece of me that just wants to say, I don't want to, I don't think it's totally wrong to come into it that way, but I think it's so important to have the awareness that, there's a cartoon about this that I love. They're kind of these candy hearts, like the ones people give out on Valentine's Day, but they're characters. And one of them just has on the candy heart section, it said, "We will not fuck you up." And then the mother side says, "Like our parents fucked you up." And then the little baby heart just says, "A new kind of fucked up."
I love that. Please send me that. We're going to link that here too.
It's the most clear, like you get it immediately.
Yeah.
And this is a huge thing I'm sitting with right now, where I am talking about with my partner about, when we might have children and what I'm bringing them into the world, why I'm doing that, what is the intention behind that is a big thing. And I do get wrapped up sometimes in all the things I would do differently. And then I catch myself saying, I actually was raised in a way that I think my parents were very focused on doing it differently. And that it has its own shortcomings in a funny way.
I really appreciate you bringing that up and holding space for that not being wrong. And I do feel that too. And when we think that things like that are wrong or like that we shouldn't do that, it can compel us, yes, to find something different, but it can also be a way that we don't acknowledge that we actually have those true desires inside of us. And the more we put a blanket over that by saying, okay, let's resist that and let's not use that intention. Sometimes that really backfires and it just lives anyway. circling back to the beginning of our conversation, where you said, I think these feelings I'm having are going to emerge no matter what. And there's such a power to just acknowledging it and respecting that and seeing where it has an effect, if you can, and claiming it so it has a place instead of just this like lingering thing somewhere in the unconscious that does pass forward and lives itself out as the little baby heart. So do you want to talk about one more topic, Nick? I know we just like laid out so many and they're all so good. But we kind of are leaning into resistance. What we resist persists. But what are you wanting to talk about now?
I think, again, it just all feels like the time of year to touch on these subjects, but I would love to talk about the phenomenon of black sheep in families, because I think this is the time of year where all that stuff comes right back up, and there are so many people that were the black sheep that are, still in recovery from their family gathering, or have, stayed home and held certain boundaries and, had to suffer watching all the family photos go by on their Facebook feed or whatever. And I think something that is just so important to me is a real respect for the phenomenon and of black sheep, how they emerge, and that they are such an important part of the evolution of our society and our culture. And so that's what comes up for me. And so then now I feel like I just want to put you on the spot. Are you the black sheep, Candice, of your family?
I saw your post that you were not the black sheep. And I was like,
I know, that's true.
Yeah. That was great, by the way. I really appreciated that. So am I the black sheep?
Yeah, I can speak more to that too. But yes, I was not the black sheep in my family, which a lot of people are surprised to hear that. But the spotlight was taken by my brother. But yeah, so you said, did you say yes, you are the black sheep?
I was thinking about it. It depends how you define black sheep. So would you define it for the people listening and for me?
It's a great, I think of the black sheep is characterized by someone that feels very strongly out of place. Sometimes people that feel they're the black sheep in their family feel like their parents aren't their parents in some way.
Yeah.
How could I possibly be their child? And they are often the carrier and the target of all the shame of the family. It's like there's this sense of, it's parents might have a tendency to almost project all their shortcomings onto the child that didn't do what they told them, or wasn't enough, or should have been smarter or different in some way, which, by the way, children are always a reflection of their parents. And so for a parent to somehow point it to a child and say, you're the problem, is just very short-sighted. But so I think it's often they feel a certain level of shame. Black sheep, as they get older, might spend very little time with their family because they might become kind of tired of it all. And I think of the kind of classic, almost like television show thing of, family dinner, and the black sheep eats the fastest, tries to gets away from the table as quickly as possible, barely talks. If they do, it's very brief. It's almost like black sheep, I think, have to be very protective of themselves, because they can be such target within families.
Yes, that was me. That's like almost everything you named. I was like, oh yeah, check. That's been my experience at certain points in my life, good chunks of my life. Definitely felt out of place. Like, how could these be my parents? But then I also saw ways in which I was just like them. A lot of shame, and very much directed towards me. Even it trickled into my siblings. And how could it not? The shame directed to me. I was known for like stirring the pot and making things worse. And that's by virtue of me expressing my feelings, saying what's going on and what I feel. And it was a lot of things my family wasn't ready to look at. And I so desperately needed them to, and needed them to acknowledge, because for me, it felt like survival. Not having enough resource for myself to survive the emotions that were going on, and the trauma that was passed down many, many years that hadn't been dealt with, that hadn't been integrated. Yeah, many moments of like running away from the dinner table, having stuffed my food in my mouth and crying. Those are really rough memories, and I've worked on them so many times, and there's still a little tender place. But I can say now that I'm in the best time of connection with my family after doing so much work, inner work and embodied work, constellations work. There's still more, of course, but I actually enjoy my family and they enjoy me now. And they've also looked at a lot. And so the shame isn't really as strong, as strong of a tidal wave, and just maybe exists in little pockets now. But as far as like the family system, it seems, from where I'm standing. So yeah, I don't feel like I'm the black sheep anymore, but I once was. And I know that you had shared Bert Hellinger's idea of black sheep, I think on your Instagram and your social media. And many people have shared that. It's really beautiful, because speaking to the black sheep as the change, the healing, bringing the evolution of the family system forward is so real to me too. And at times that's felt like too much of a responsibility, because it was. And other times it's felt like an honor and, of course, my place. Like it makes sense. Like I wanted to do that. But so you're not the black sheep.
It's so funny. This always happens, is that as I connect to something over and over again, it deepens. And I just, as I'm hearing you, I feel like I have, I actually felt I really connected to something about me that's a little bit more than maybe what I had shared, which is, yes, traditionally in my family, there's the obvious black sheep is my younger brother. And he just was a huge handful in a lot of ways, and really upended so much of the family in so many ways. But what I would say is, I said this when we started, that he kind of took the role from me, because I feel if he wasn't there, then it would have been me. And I always kind of wished I could have been as disruptive as him. But then I think I had this awareness of how it would just kind of destroy the family to have another kid that is rebelling like that. And so I felt conscious of that, of like, I don't have a place to be the rebel anymore. But I will say this is what I connected to as I was talking, is that I'm actually truly from a family of black sheep. My father was the black sheep of his family, and my mother was the black sheep of her family. And maybe that's not absolutely 100% clear for my mother, there's like a little bit of a gray area there, but for my father, it absolutely was. And it's funny. It's like I'm like second generation Black sheep in some way, which has a huge role in so much of who I am, because I wasn't raised with religion. I'm the first person in both sides of my family to not be raised with religion at all. And there's a million other traditions that I was maybe not part of, or partly just because of that, because there's so many traditions connected to a religion. So there's a funny, I think I realized I'm broadening the perspective a little bit. I'm kind of in the sphere of the Black sheep, but maybe on the micro level, it was more clear that my brother was the big one. But can I actually, that Bert Hellinger quote, may I just read it? Please so that people can hear it? Because I think it's really captures what I feel about the Black sheep. And I think so many people, when they hear it, it just has a feeling to it.
Yeah, I'd love that.
So I'll just read it. I brought it up because I think I had a feeling we'd be talking about it. So the so-called Black sheep of the family are, in fact, seekers of liberation roads for the family tree. Those members of the tree who do not adapt to the rules or traditions of the family system. Those who are constantly seeking to revolutionize beliefs, going in contrast to roads marked by family traditions. Those criticized, tried, and even rejected, those by general. They are called to release the tree of repetitive stories that frustrate entire generations. The Black sheep, those who do not adapt, those who scream rebel, repair, detoxify, and create a new blooming branch. Countless unfulfilled desires, unfulfilled dreams, frustrated talents of our ancestors manifest themselves in the Black sheep's rebellion looking to take place. The family tree, by inertia, will want to continue to maintain the castrating and toxic course of its trunk, which makes its task, the Black sheep's task, difficult and conflicting. That no one makes you doubt, take care of your rarity as the most precious flower of your tree. You are the dream of all your ancestors. And and that's by Bert Hellinger.
It's so lovely.
Yeah. You know, it just, for me, it captures so many things, but I do feel that Black sheep carve new roads for families. You know, without Black sheep, families can just keep repeating over and over again. And it's the Black sheep that kind of force them to face things. And even if the family that sits around the quote unquote Black sheep doesn't receive anything, doesn't take anything in, you know that the children of the Black sheep are never going to be the same. They're always going to experience traditions and family in a different way. So it's I think Black sheep are just so intertwined with evolution. And as he says, you're the dream of your ancestors. And I really believe that our ancestors, it is their dream that we evolve and become more of who we are and more in tune with what fulfills us and what serves others in the world. And so that's, I can't say enough of how I put Black sheep on a pedestal. I really have a lot of respect for that role in families. So thank you, Candice, for playing that role and coming through it, coming through the eye of that needle.
You know, I'm starting to think about Black sheep in a broader context too, because originally when you said, "Are you the Black sheep?" and I had read your post referring to your brother, I started to think about Black sheep in this sort of identified patient kind of way. You know, and that language comes from the world of psychology and counseling. Like when a family says, "We need help because so-and-so has a problem in our family." they name one person as the one with the problem. And
Right.
yeah, I often think of that person as maybe the black sheep, and that they have a lot of, they can typically have a lot of symptoms, or maybe there's alcoholism, or there's something that becomes very severe that the family cannot continue to look away. And I wouldn't say that was me. I mean, the worst thing I ever did was, and it's kind of bad, when I was 16, I got a speeding ticket for 51 over the speed limit. Yeah, it's a lot.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was crazy. I never drove that way again, but so that's probably the worst that I've ever done. And so I couldn't relate to it in terms of being a certain kind of like severe set of symptoms, or experiencing rebellion in a way that is very like oppositional or something like that. But I think that that's the way I'm seeing it now can be helpful for anyone that doesn't perhaps relate to that kind of experience too. And as you're talking, Nick, that there are parts of us that feel like black sheep. There might be a part of us that we can connect with that has felt like it's been black sheeped, so to say. Maybe that's just shame. Where we feel shame, or yeah.
Well, I love that. The way I was hearing it was that it's that perhaps the part of us that doesn't feel like it belongs is actually the part that is bringing something new to the world. We don't belong because something that we are, it's not here yet. It's not accepted yet. But actually, if we can find acceptance with it in ourselves and share it and be it, then we actually are giving something to the world. We're helping it, by including more.
Yeah. So if we can find our inner black sheep, the parts of us that don't feel like they belong, those are the most essential to the entire, wave of evolution and the dreams of the ancestors of all kinds.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Wow. It's like where newness emerges from. Wow.
That's nice, Nick. Nice. It's a nice place to close too. Feel complete.
I think there's no way that we could switch
we're done here.
and go into something else after that.
We are done. Except I would love for you to just briefly talk about your retreat. Yeah. Because it's coming up February. Okay. What is it, the 14th through the 18th?
The 14th.
19th.
Through the 19th, actually.
Of 2020.
A little half day. Yeah. Yep. So, I know you've done many retreats, Candice, and I feel very strongly that, family constellations are beautiful one-on-one. They're beautiful in a group workshop setting. But I believe that they take on their most powerful, most resourceful state when they're in a retreat setting. There is something about gathering with the group and being in that container for multiple days that just the energy just builds and builds and builds. And I see it in my own facilitation. I mean, the retreat work I think is beautiful. And so
absolutely.
Yeah. And you and I know this because we met at obviously the intensive, which is a form of a retreat, which was super powerful. And I think meeting you was a part of what made that so powerful for me.
Same here.
Huge part of it.
Yeah, it was huge.
So this retreat, we're going to be in Mazunte, Mexico, which is southern Mexico, and it's overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And it's just a really beautiful place. Again, it's like you can walk 5 minutes to the water, and we'll be doing family constellations work and various forms of shadow work. The stuff that, it really goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this call of, when you set these intentions, you will meet certain barriers. And at that point, it's important to call in your resources. So all of the work we're doing is literally to meet you at that point, is, resources that help people actually do the work of chipping away and doing the integration and processing with these barriers. So we'll get there on Friday and be doing that work on this beautiful terrace that is kind of open air. And I'm super excited about it because these groups come together and it's just, people leave as incredible friends. And I still see from my past retreats, people basically communicating with each other that I know had met at some of the work that we had been doing.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so
it sounds beautiful. And what a great time to, if you live in the Midwest or somewhere cold, to get out into a little bit of warmth and get the fire on and inside.
It's a big part of it. Yeah. That was a big part of why we scheduled it at this time was, there's going to be really beautiful, deep work going on, but there is a lot of space built in to just go chill on the beach, which is great. Can be just as important. And the weather, I think, is like, mid 80s basically when you're down there.
Sounds so good.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Awesome. Where can people find that retreat, Nick?
So if you go to my website, which is just Nick, the letter N, and then Werber.com, you can go there. Or my Instagram is nwerber. And then all of it's actually being hosted through Maha Rose, which is this incredible organization that's based in Brooklyn. And so Maha Rose's website, MAHAROSE.com, is another place where you can read up about it.
Thank you so much, Nick. This was fun. And do you feel like how'd we do on our intentions?
I think we did great. And I think we did well because that it was funny, that moment where you said, I think we have to close there, was actually the moment where I had felt a sense of, oh, wow, it's the exact kind of subject that I will spend the next 2 weeks thinking about. Of, all those places where I don't feel I belong, of which there are many. Is it possible that that's just something that's emerging that the world needs? And can I respect it in that way? So I think there is a fullness that I feel when I just connect to that right now. So I think we did well, and maybe listeners can decide for themselves.
to each their own of their experience. And I'll be thinking about that too. And it's kind of like a twist on something I've been doing for some time, but the words are so poignant now, like all the ways I feel I don't belong now, or maybe in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's so, obviously the reflexive way to experience that is, it's just the opposite. It's I don't belong, and there must be something wrong with me, and all the shame stuff that we talked about. So it definitely is turning an idea on its head in a way that, I don't know about you, but the moment I connect with it, I feel that sense that my body relaxes and I feel clearer. And, for me, it's all the signals of there's something.
Yeah, same here. There. I feel that playfulness that I was wanting about it, to approach it with a playfulness. It's a fun process to think about it in this way. And I learned so much. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Candice. I feel like, can we do this again next week?
We still have to talk about all sorts of things like letting go, which kind of, I love that topic. That was one of the ones that kept me up. And what we resist persists, like how just looking at that in different ways and through the body. So yeah, a little teaser for our next podcast whenever that comes, but let's do it.
You've set up the perfect cliffhanger for next time.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, definitely see you next time. And just want to say one more thing, actually. Thank you so much for offering the music for the Embody podcast, the intro and outro music. I still use it. It's still on every single podcast, and you created it. It's so lovely.
I know. I love it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so glad.
I'm so grateful for Nick's presence out in the world and what he's doing in support of other people and in growing the work of Family Constellations in his unique way. It's really beautiful to be challenged by his work and to learn and grow from it, and also to exchange in the ways that we do as friends and as colleagues. Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you all out there for listening. I hope this does give you something to nibble on as we close today. Be sure to check out Nick's website if you're interested in his work or the retreat coming up, and his Instagram, where he shares a lot of his writing. And again, his website is nicknwerber.com. And you can find all of the links at the show notes related to this episode at candicewu.com/Nick-Part-2. And as we send each other forward into this new year, 2020, this has already been quite a long podcast, so I'm just going to pretty much close it out from here and send you off with, of course, Nick's lovely intro-outro music. If you're interested in staying connected, you can feel free to sign up for my newsletter at candicewu.com/embody, where I share all about the podcast and the experientials and meditations that come out, as well as events, self-love notes, and updates about me. Thanks so much, and see you next time on the Embody podcast.